if I'm hearing you correctly, plate modified 1x1 with open O clip horizontal grip is not conducive to putting on a label.
Oh, I can picture it right now.
No, but I mean, I know what part it is. It's the one that's got the two studs on either side like that. But like, no, that's a terrible, terrible name for a human.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We are your co-host. I'm Grinch.
And I'm West.
And today we are talking about sorting and storing Lego. And to do that, we are welcoming a very special guest, Tom Alphin. Tom is the author of the best-selling book, The Lego Architect, and the creator of brickarchitect.com, where AFOLs can find the definitive guide to Lego storage, part labels, and so much more. But before we get to that really exciting topic and really exciting guest, West, I've got to ask you. I ask you this every week. How was your week? What did you build this week?
You know, this week I haven't had a chance to like open up a fresh build, but I ended last week working on the Jaws set. I actually have it right next to me. You might be able to see it in the corner of the frame. It was a really great build. I know last week I commented on the boat. This weekend I finished up Bruce, the shark, and the actual build for the water. And what a treat that was, just working through the brick sculpting of the water itself with a lot of really great sloped pieces and using kind of the whites and the blues in some really effective ways. It comes together at the end in a really, really awesome way. And it is just such a great model. It's a lot of fun.
I thought it was funny that you're literally using recolored Lego road plates for like the surface. And I just was like, oh, this is a water road, I guess, for a shark. Okay.
Well, and what a great use of parts, just in terms of like the economic use of parts, in the model itself, right? Because there could be a lot more that you'd have to put there, whether it be tiles or a large 16 by 16 plate, but instead they use these road plates to great effect. And it's, in one of those situations where they're able to build over it in such a way that what's left over is kind of a tiled surface, but you'd have to know it's a road plate underneath there to kind of pick up on it after the fact, which is kind of cool. I will say I was actually missing a piece. It was a fishing pole. The set came with 4 of them. I only got 3, but I actually had an extra piece, which was a 2x2 slope piece. So kind of interesting. I get the jitters every time I see one of those, right? I think you talked to me about this a few years ago of like, you really only expect to have extra small pieces, but never kind of bigger pieces. So if you have an extra big piece, usually an indication that you did something incorrectly. But I checked it against the total piece count on the back of the instructions, and I got 3 of them instead of 2. So definitely was an extra piece, but not intentional. So kind of fascinating.
Did you like tear through the instructions for like 5 minutes being like, okay, did I just miss it like twice, or like, is this just extra?
Yeah, no, it was one of those pieces where it was used only once in the set, and like specifically on the roof of the boat. So I was like, well, I don't know where else this would have gone. So it was pretty easy to kind of identify it as a culprit. But, we've speculated in the past that they load the sets by weight. And so stands to reason if you're missing a piece, the odds are you probably have an extra other piece potentially.
Right.
If it passed the scales on its way to being bagged. So as part of its
otherwise a quality control checkpoint would be like, right. Didn't say the magic word. Yeah.
So, but Grinch, what were you building this week?
I have to say, I think this is the first time I've come with a goose egg. I've been on paternity leave, so we talked about it. Lego's a hobby that we enjoy. It's not a job. It's not something that we have to force ourselves to do every single week. And this week, between the podcast and my new daughter, I didn't have the time. So this is my Lego time this week. But what good time this episode's gonna be.
It's funny because I sent you a reel last week of somebody kind of saying that, they get home from work and they're like, it's been a tough day at work. I need to crack a cold one. And they go and they reach in the refrigerator and it's a cold Lego set that they pull out. And so, that was kind of what the Jaws set was for me last week. It sounds like you've had a busy week. I know right now, after this week, I could certainly crack a cold one. So, you just got to let it ride,
go stock the fridge with some speed champions, so you can go home and just nice little 2-hour build, hour build.
I heard a rumor, I think it was on the Brick Fan, that there's some speed champion sets at Costco, but I have not been able to confirm it. So
I saw on Reddit that they have at Costco, and I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe the price was $21.
That's what I saw
for the
too.
new Formula Ones. I saw a photo of it.
That would be amazing.
So, check your Costco's, folks. And if you're not a member, go get go adult. Like, we're adult fans of Legos. Like, I think it comes with the adult title, right?
It does. And for real though, like, their discounts on Legos are phenomenal sometimes.
It's insane sometimes, yeah.
But the trade-off is their selection is not. And sometimes there's no selection.
You get one pallet.
Yep.
You get one pallet, or if you're lucky, you might get 2 or 3. But there's the set. And if it's the set of the month that you don't want, you got to wait a whole month or however long it takes to sell out.
But anyways, yes, sometimes
but do you know
really great deals.
Do you know what is exciting?
Oh, what's that?
This week's news. Let's head over to some exciting Lego news. Come on, you should have seen that one coming. Exciting Lego news. All right, so West, for news this week, do you want to run us down not a huge news week, but some really exciting pieces of news this week?
Yeah. So our first item for exciting Lego news was that the Beauty and the Beast castle was revealed. It's releasing on April 1st for insiders. The set has over 2,900 pieces and will retail for around $280 US. The Lego Ideas Build Your Brick Story building contest was announced, and the Lego Jurassic World Rebirth sets were officially announced, and we have images all over the internet and YouTube. And the Lego Festival was announced for Legoland Parks. So Grinch, what stood out for you? Do we want to talk about the 800 or 80-ton theropod, or I don't think that's a formal dinosaur word. Let's talk about the dinos.
Dude, these are awesome. There is, we were talking about it, the Raptor Off-Road Escape. 2 things I wanted to point out on here. There is the little baby dinosaur, which is updated mold. That looks pretty cool. The Raptor in it uses the Atrociraptor mold, but it is a Velociraptor, and it uses the Atrociraptor mold from Dominion. So that's different, which is definitely closer in scale to a minifigure than that really tall raptor. Of course, that original Raptor mold has a special place in my heart. But this off-road vehicle, no idea what it is. It's not branded. Looks like some sort of Jeep Humvee mix. Really looks a little bit more similar to the off-road vehicles in The Lost World. Is awesome. Really, really awesome.
It's it's funny, the Lego Jurassic World series and Jurassic Park series does off-roading vehicles better than like any Lego series, I think, out there. And this is
Hmm.
just like a really great example. This is a really great set for like vehicles, not set, series, right? This whole wave, really, with the kind of speedboat that we get with the Mosasaurus. Yeah, this awesome, like hefty 4x4 truck thing that, yeah, kind of gives off some Hummer EV vibes a little bit,
Hmm.
but, we'll kind of see. And then we have the 6x6 later on, that's kind of a repeat from the last Jurassic World movie, but still a really cool inclusion in this series. It's just really fun to see these sets in this scale, or these vehicles in these sets in this scale, and I'm just excited to get my hands on it. One of the things I noticed in that Velociraptor ambush is the driver of the Jeep, or 4x4, has a recolored pistol in orange,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
clearly like a flare gun. And I don't, for the life of me, I don't recall ever seeing an orange pistol like that before. So I think that's a really neat change, right? Like I think that'll be a really fun inclusion to include in like any sort of rescue or outdoor adventure set. I'm sure we'll start to see those more in the future as like specifically a flare gun inclusion.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what other colors we'll ever see it in, for like Greebling or something.
Hmm.
I'm staring
Absolutely.
at this temple build, which
Yeah.
in its own right is a really fun set. Jurassic Park, or sorry, Jurassic World or not, really cool set. I feel like the helicopter is maybe slightly better than it needs to be, or than I'd expect from a
Yeah.
Jurassic set. Usually they come with the helicopter and they're like only so. This one looks pretty good, kind of like the quadcopter jet thing that they had in the big Dominion set. I'm forgetting what that was called. And then of course we get another Quetzalcoatlus, same mold but different recolor, which is really awesome. And then you know, the Spinosaurus looks pretty
Yes.
good.
Which is just
Looks
so cool to
pretty
see.
good.
This helicopter build is probably one of the better small scale helicopters that Lego's made, just in terms of its, I mean, there's really nothing in like the current world of helicoptering that quite looks like this, but it does kind of give off like the little bird vibes a little bit. That's kind of the what I'm seeing when I see
Hmm.
this helicopter. But just looking at like the skids and stuff, there's just like a lot of attention to detail with how they've designed it. Seeing like the yellow stripes on the rotor blades is really cool. And then it's almost like a completely enclosed cockpit, which for some reason Lego just has never quite been able to execute. So I think it's a really fun build too. The temple almost gives off like Indiana Jones vibes,
Oh yeah.
and there's like some really fun builds for like the temple guardians that are, like mouths and noses and stuff. And I think we saw some of those techniques used in Indiana
Hmm.
Jones.
Yep.
And we saw kind of this scene taking place in the trailer, right? So they're like trying to find an egg, if I understood the trailer correctly, so that they could get DNA from it or something to that effect. But to just kind of discuss the one dino that like we just have not had since Lego dinosaurs really kind of our Jurassic World branded sets, or Jurassic Park branded sets really came around, right? Like the Spinosaurus. It's just really
Ironically,
cool to
which was
see finally.
also one of the first dinos we kind of got because they
Hmm.
did their old, system, right? And then they updated the molds to these, this modern technique, and just, you know, do you blame Lego for not making Jurassic Park 3 sets?
Right.
No. I
Not
mean,
really.
you could live in a world where, like, yeah, they had to, there's a cult following for that movie now, but there's nothing Lego's done that would suggest that they would go back and revisit that movie. They'd have to do Lost Rules first. So, I digress, but um, the tail, too, dude. The tail on the Spino is what I'm really looking at, because it's
Yeah.
bendy. It's bendy, and I'm curious if it moves at all or if it's always in that position. My guess is it may be always in that position, but typically,
Which,
like with the T Rexes, it's just been a kind of a straighter tail. This has got a little bit of a curve.
if it's always in that position, does that bother you if it's kind of stuck there?
Not really. With some of the other sets, we got actual images, and with the other ones, like the T-Rex tail can like, it's on essentially
It
an
like
axle that
swivels,
can turn.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can turn it around like in the socket. With
Hmm.
this, it looks like there might be a little socket back there as well, so you might be able to get a couple different angles. But um, really, when something's not super mobile, at the end of the day, it's Lego, right?
Hmm.
Like minifigures are somewhat stiff for trying to be people. Like the leg only moves. You can't bend the leg at the knee. You can only move the arm up and down. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
Lego's a
Hmm.
little bit of a stiff medium in the first place. So like that is certainly not going to make or break this for me not
Yeah.
at all.
No, and so yeah, this is just an exciting wave. I really like. We mentioned the Mosasaurus set, right? It's this brick build Mosasaurus. We're getting better images of it. I could not be happier with him. I know some people wanted it to be like a larger kind of molded model or figure, if you will. But the way his body kind of swims, and they kind of show it on the back of the box, the artwork there of him kind of swimming through the water
Mm-hmm.
and moving. I just, could not be any happier with that. It just really kind of reminds me of the T Rex from the T Rex Rampage set and T Rex Escape sets, respectively, where they had kind of that tail sort of movement really kind of well done, right? And so just it feels so natural. And when you're especially the larger T Rex model, when you hold it up and you see the tail kind
Mm-hmm.
of moves as you move him around, it just brings it to life in a really unique way. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that. What I will kind of leave with the discussion on my end is I really like the minifigure inclusion and selection here. Not only do we have this like wide range of minifigures from the movie itself, including, Scarlett Johansson in Lego minifigure form again, we also have just, it's not just Chris Pratt over and over and over again, which I just really, really appreciate. The one kind of shame of the Jurassic World Lego set series in my mind was if you collected them all, which Grinch, I think you more or less did. You
Every
probably
single
have
one,
like 70
even
Chris
the
Pratts in your
exclusive.
collections,
No, not
and it just,
70, 65.
oh yeah, sorry, excuse me. I stand
don't
corrected.
be don't be
So,
ridiculous.
it's just, and it's nothing against, Chris Pratt necessarily in the movie or as a, character in the film. It just getting that character in Lego form over and over and over again just was so repetitive. But we get such a great mix of characters in these sets. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I think, a real pleasure because it kind of goes back to the day of like, collecting more of the series to get all of the figures versus kind of, collecting one set and having,
Well,
the
it's funny
figure he's
because the
included.
first, like the Jurassic World wave that came out with
Hmm.
that movie in 2015, if I recall, there was only one set or two sets that came with Chris Pratt. It
Yeah.
wasn't until uh, Fallen Kingdom, I think there was like 3 or 4 sets. Dominion, there was like only one or two, but then it was really like the Camp Cretaceous sets, the sets that they did, the Legends of Isla Nublar sets that had, it just kind of got like super repetitive at that
Hmm.
point. So if they, if there's a whole trilogy of sets here, um, I wonder, will we be saying the same thing about like Scarlett Johansson at the end of it? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I'm That's fair, but to that point, right? She's included in what looks like three of the sets, kind of the three main characters are kind of in 3 to 4 of those sets, but then you've got just a wide variety of different characters included of both male, female, and a variety of
Mm-hmm.
skin tones as well too, which is just really nice to see in a Lego set.
Yeah, and it looks like if there are repeats, they might have different torsos. So it's not
Hmm.
I can't quite tell with the Scarlett Johansson in the images that
Yeah.
we're looking at. But the last thing I wanted to say on this is I feel like I'm kind of here and there on the box art, the box styling, I should say.
Yeah.
I always feel like the Jurassic World sets, going all the way back to the original Jurassic World movie, always have really interesting box arts. And for
Mm,
some reason, like I just kind of gravitate towards it. You know, Dominion had that really like dark ambery color. Obviously, the 30th anniversary sets were
hmm.
that bright lime green and red,
Yeah.
dark red, and like yellowy color. The Jurassic World sets were like really blue and white, and this is just like this kind of like black and red, almost like racing stripe vibe. It kind of gives me Formula One vibes a little bit. It like doesn't really
Hmm.
feel like
Hmm.
Jurassic to me, but it's still like sometimes I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's unique, and then other times I'm like, does that fit? I don't know, but I just thought I'd point that out because I feel like that's a little unique to
Yeah.
this theme is the box art always has this really distinctive stylistic feel to it, kind of like Star Wars does. A lot of
Hmm.
you can kind of
Hmm.
just you can tell the different eras of Star Wars just by looking at the box.
Well, I think one of the things that we can be happy about from that perspective is they didn't go like full hidden side on the sets. So at least we have a good idea of what we're getting when we buy them. So,
Yes,
which
yes.
is always a good technique.
Was there any other news you wanted to talk? I mean, the Beauty and the Beast castle. Neither of us are really Disney adults. I showed it to my wife, and she was like, "Oh, that's pretty."
Yeah, I
And I was
know
like,
we
"Oh,
kind
okay."
of threatened our listeners last week about talking through sort of the rise of adult oriented Lego sets. I think that
Hmm.
is an episode we have on the hook here for following up later on this year. Um, this is, I think, a really great example of just like it's a really expensive set. It's really big. It
Yeah.
looks great, but just I don't know. Again, we don't know how many they're going to make, so we don't really understand the larger strategy here from Lego. But I suppose Disney castles are maybe going to be more of a thing, right? I mean, we had the main Disney castle that was released 2 years
Hmm.
ago or 3 years ago.
Oh,
So
well, the original one was 2016,
yes, yep.
and
And
then
this
they
was
did
the
there's
revisit
the Magic Kingdom one, and
refresh.
then the
Yeah,
Disneyland one. There
yeah.
was the two different, the Florida and the California park
Mm.
castle.
So it's, I mean, it's nice to see the series. It's, I like it when they do the Disney characters in minifigure form versus mini doll
Hmm.
form. So that's exciting to see like a Belle in minifigure form versus the mini doll form, and that's where I think some of these castles really shine is that you get some really unique characters outside of the mini doll realm for the Lego Disney series.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I don't know.
I've
I
been
think
enjoying it
what's
from a
important
distance.
here, yeah, I think what's important is there's a lot of people that are hyped about it
Yeah.
because
Well,
this
that's
set's
great.
just not for me, and that's fine. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
people like all the comments that I've seen have been pretty overwhelmingly positive, which I'm
Yeah.
happy about because if it is an almost $300 set, like I hope people like it and aren't like this is terrible. Now I got to go buy it. Like I love that line. Like, oh, this sucks, but I got to go buy it. Um, so yeah, I'm happy for the people that will enjoy it.
Well, and I think as Lego fans, right, we have to, I know we're going long on our news here, but what I'll say is I think as Lego fans, we need to be okay with things that are not for us, right? And you and I have talked
Mm-hmm.
about like learning to enjoy sets from a distance, right? And acknowledging that of like, I think this is one I'm going to enjoy from a distance. And so I think that's okay, right? Just because you don't like or you want to enjoy that set from a distance doesn't mean you have to like hate the set, right? And as Lego
Right.
is diversifying its portfolio with more adult oriented sets across its entire theme range, right? That means that we're going to see sets that we just, hey, they're not for us. That is
Mm-hmm.
okay. We can still respect and acknowledge the positive, attributes of the set without, necessarily spending money on it. So I think that's just a really
Yeah.
healthy discussion. And yeah, it's really exciting. It's cool to see a French castle done in this style. That was kind of the unique thing about the Beauty and Beast movie. And so it's kind of cool to see that built up in that capacity. Um, but yeah, again, one that I will enjoy from a distance. Some great recolors of parts and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Very colorful, very, very cool. Um, Lego Ideas Contest, all I'll say there is if that's your thing, awesome. This is unique because it sounds like it's a very open-ended contest. Like it's not like 80s, it's just build your own unique story with Lego. So I think that's something I'm gonna follow because I feel like you're gonna get some really interesting and creative because it's pretty open ended, it seems. So just wanted
Yeah.
to call that out in the news here a little bit more. So West, I know I've been looking forward to this episode all week. I know you've been looking forward to this episode all week. Let's go
Yeah.
ahead and head over to today's topic. Today's topic. All right. So, as I mentioned today, we are talking all about sorting and storing Lego. And we brought on the sorting and storing expert. But not only has Mr. Tom Alphin written the definitive guide essentially on storing Lego parts, he's also made labels. He's also an author. He also has a website. So, Tom, I could sit here and probably introduce you for 30 minutes, but I think it might come better from the man himself. Tom, welcome to AFOLs Welcome. We're so happy to have you on.
Welcome.
Well, hi there, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure always to talk about Lego with other, nerds who want to geek out with me about it. So, thank you for having me.
Well, you're certainly in the right place if that's the intention. So
yes.
Introduce yourself. You're the brick architect. You're an author. Tell me about the AFOL story that led to that point for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, like maybe not all, but most AFOLs, I was a very enthusiastic Lego builder when I was young. I had nowhere near as much Lego as I have now, but for a kid growing up in the 80s, I was actually very fortunate. Had a fair number of Lego space sets, then a fair number of city sets. And then my last theme that I was really big on was the original Lego Pirates wave. And it's all based on how old I was. I was 9 when that dropped, and that stuff was really good. That big pirate ship, those islands where the pirates could have these battles. It was I don't think I had the words for it then, but those sets were just packed with storytelling, and it was just really cool. And then I never did completely stop building, but it was not a big part of my life for at least 10 or 15 years. I would often get like a small Lego set at Christmas because my family knew that I enjoyed spending an hour over the holidays building something. Could be anything, but it was always a nice little break. And the theme that got me dabbling into into Lego as an adult was the Lego Architecture series. I got a few of the early Lego Architecture sets, like there's a small Space Needle, Empire State Building, etc. But I wasn't like hooked, so to speak. I just was sort of like, it piqued my interest. I built them and I put them on the shelf in my office. The set that did kind of draw me back in and drew me back in pretty hard was set 21050. That's the Lego Architecture Studio set, which was the set that contained only white and clear bricks. It came with a book that was trying to inspire you not to build specific models, but to build things from your own creativity. And I was feeling, I laugh about this now, but I was feeling a little self-conscious about spending $150 on a Lego set at the time. So I took it upon myself to create what I called a 30-day challenge. And this wasn't necessarily to happen in 1 month's calendar time, but the idea was to do 30 discrete projects using the pieces from that set. And most of those projects were learning about quickly, like maybe in an hour, learning about an architectural style and building something simple inspired by it. But I also made some MC Escher style things where you have to photograph it just right to make the waterfall look like it's looping. And I just was having fun with sort of exploring the Lego hobby in a more serious way for the first time as an adult. And as I was kind of doing that, I collected a little bit more Lego parts than the ones that come in that set. I discovered Bricklink, as we all do, and I ordered a few extra pieces.
Slippery slope, right?
Right. And then, of course, once you have, instead of 2,000, 3,000, whatever pieces, you need to start organizing them. And I fairly quickly gravitated first to those like Plano style bins that open with the little compartments, and then switching over to these Acro Mills style drawers. But they really did need labels because you couldn't find things very easily. So I made my own labels. I shared those labels in about the next spring in like 2014. And people they responded positively to them, even though there was only maybe 200 labels at first. So one track of my journey is I kept updating these labels for years and years and years, and I continue to update them. And there must be thousands of people that use my labels at this point. It's pretty fun to see photos like, they're not even trying to share a photo of my labels. They're just, sharing a photo from their Lego room, and I'm like, those are mine.
Oh,
that's cool.
I don't know this, but I made those.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that's kind of like my first minor claim to fame in the Lego community. I guess, and the 30-day challenge was, it was casual, but it was pretty well received as well.
Were you a bit of a photo nerd too, and kind of just you wanted to explore that world of like building and taking a photo and sorts?
I was already a pretty experienced photographer. I mostly travel photography, so studio work was not my focus. So it was less about practicing the photography so much as telling the story and taking a good enough photo to reinforce that story. But yeah, that was kind of that whole chapter was, I did this 30-day challenge. I started it in October 2013. It probably took me through November, December. But I got the 30 projects done, shared them with the world. And I took a little bit of a slower pace in sharing new content from that point forward. Trying to jump forward just a little bit because I don't want this to be too long. In sort of spring 2014, I was actually in Europe at the time with my wife. We were in Paris, at Notre Dame and Centre Pompidou and all these amazing pieces of history and architecture. And I got a total cold call email from someone from a publisher I'd never heard of, being like, "Have you ever thought about writing a book about Lego?" And I was like, "No."
How's it crossed my mind?
No, but I did actually immediately they sometimes say inspiration takes a slow burn, and sometimes it's just immediately know what you want to do. And I just knew right away because favorite part of that 30-day challenge was when I delve into specific architecture styles. I was like, I could write a book that teaches people about architectural styles, and then gives you examples of real buildings and Lego models. And that's what I did. And I would not recommend writing a book that intense or that complicated as quickly as I did, because over the course of maybe a calendar year's time, I wrote the entire book. And it's really not one book. Wow. It's more like 3 books. It's like 3 books because there's the book that's about the history of each style and the photos. Then there's a gallery of cool mocks that people from all over the world have made. And then the last part is instructions to build something small in that architectural style, so you can use your Lego Architecture Studio or the parts you already have to build something in each style and kind of get your hands building in that way and thinking about the style in that new way. So that was totally intense. Not recommended to go quite so hard if you decide to write a book one day. Maybe take 2 years to do something at that scope. But I'm so pleased with it. The response has been fantastic. It's in 10 languages.
It's crazy.
I find it in stores when I'm traveling. It's pretty cool.
Does that does that feeling ever wear off of, you just stumble across your book at a Barnes and Nobles when you're on vacation, or are you like, yeah?
It doesn't. It doesn't wear off, and I feel a little self-conscious about it because it's kind of a weird thing to say, but especially if I'm in a small independent bookstore and I see it, I will offer to sign a couple copies, and they're always thrilled because autographed books connect with their their shoppers, and it feels a little special, and it feels weird to scribble on a book because, like, you know, I was raised to not write in books, but no, it's cool, and it's a way of connecting with builders, and it's fun. Yeah, doesn't get old to see something you worked hard on.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I actually received your book as a Christmas gift from my father one year, just as like a, hey, I know, you know, I liked architecture, he liked architecture, he kind of got us into Lego, and it was just kind of this mutual connection. So just sort of, awesome. You know, serendipitous, I suppose. Eventually we would be talking to you. So kind of a neat connection there.
Yeah, awesome, and I'm that's so cool to hear that made its way into your life as well. I guess, like, to try to bring us smoothly into the topic today about storage. The next big project I did after the after the book is I created a website to sort of support my ongoing Lego and architecture explorations.
You were an author now of Lego. Yeah. You had a reputation to uphold, right?
Yeah. Instead of just posting on my personal tomalphin.com website, I thought I should have like a Lego website. So I did that. And one of the next big projects I took on was writing this Lego storage guide. Mm-hmm. And the line of thinking is pretty clear. Like, I was already connecting with other builders through my labels, and they were telling me about how they used them to organize their collection, and like strategies for sorting parts that works well for people. And I just started sort of collecting these in my head, and I wanted to get it out onto not on paper, but you know, into the internet, into the bits. So I started writing out this Lego storage guide, and it has maybe 8-ish chapters, but it takes you through the process of first understanding, you know, what your collection is, how big it is roughly. You know, do you have 1,000 pieces, 10,000 pieces, 100,000 pieces, 1,000,000 pieces, more than 1,000,000 pieces? Because the strategies that make sense for each of these, you know, order of magnitude increases in the number of parts you have are going to be different. And then you're thinking about the age of the primary builder. Is this for an adult? Is this for a very young child? Because children just build differently. Yeah. It's more about the serendipitous discovery of two parts and then discovering the ways that they can go together for them. Whereas at some point, most adult builders flip into I want this part, or I want this color, and I just need to find it, and digging for it can be
takes time, and
or you might not have the right part or the right color, and that can become its own frustration. So then I just started learning from people. I actually set up a survey, like a Google Docs style survey, where I probably got a couple hundred responses, and that really informed, it reinforced some of the main theories I had around like this is a good strategy for sorting on the order of 1,000 pieces, 10,000, 100,000 or more. I don't remember where my exact breakpoints are. They're all in that Lego storage guide. But it really did give people a much better starting point than what happened before, which was, figure out what works for you and good luck.
Right.
And then maybe if you're really lucky, you would find like the really old LugNet article that said, the 10 different times you resort your collection, but the end result is you're always going to ultimately end up sorting by part, not by color, with some very, very specific exceptions of people that do a lot of like mosaic work where the color really is more important than the part shape. So yeah, that kind of grew and grew.
That's your story, huh?
Yeah, and it became
simple.
Quite the resource. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess the last thing that's related to the Lego storage guide is, while I was, writing other articles on my website, reviews of sets, articles on creativity, I did a couple of things that were like super data driven and nerdy that people really responded to. One of them was a really detailed analysis of the most common Lego parts,
Okay.
using the actual inventories from sets to inform that designation of which colors are common, uncommon, and rare. And I know you just did an episode on that a couple weeks ago, probably now.
Yeah.
So like that was top of mind when I saw that coming through. And then I also did a web page. I don't know if you call it an article, which was I crunched the numbers and said these are the most common Lego parts. And one of the kind of interesting problems there is that I can't just go to the Lego group and say, all right, can you give me the 1 to 1,000
Yeah.
list of which pieces you produce in the greatest quantities to the lowest quantities? Because they're a private family-owned company. They don't have to tell us that. But the approach I took was I actually just assumed you bought one of every set from the last 5 years and sorted all of those pieces by part and color. And that gives you a pretty darn good proxy for the distribution of parts they produce in a given year. And I know it's pretty close because at one point I shared it with a colleague, or not a colleague, but a person that worked at Lego. And he was like, yeah, the 1x2 plate at the time really was the most common part. So what I thought was the most common was in fact the most
Yeah.
common. So that general approach seems to shake out pretty well.
Well, and I'm sure it has changed. I mean, you've been doing this for a while now. Has it kind of changed throughout the decades? Like back in the day when you were collecting pirates and a kid, there was a lot more brick-based stuff, right? And now it's definitely more plate-based as they've tried to get way more detail into it. So have you noticed that that's changed, just in 20 years or 10 years that you've done this?
I have the ability to look at specific data, like windows of time, like specific slices of time. But my focus is usually on what's current because I feel like giving readers resources to know what the most common current parts are is more useful than what the most common parts in 1980 through 1985 would be. But I can pull those numbers, and I have occasionally pulled them out of curiosity. Like I was trying to update my label collection to have like all the classic, the most common classic space parts. So I ran the numbers for 1980 through 1989, and I made sure that first golden age of Lego, at least in my heart and mind, was well represented within the label collection. And yeah, it is more. It was more bricks, and it was more bigger elements then.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the distribution of parts in in modulars in your modular article, and yeah, the number of the price per part hasn't changed that much, but the size of the parts has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
The details have gotten finer. The pixel, there's more. We were 1080p and now we're 4K, right? TV's the same size.
I like that analogy. Yeah, I think that really does actually that checks out. So yeah, that's kind of been my story, and I'm always continuing to invest in these resources and my storage guide, my newer parts guide, the labels, all of these things, like they all ladder up to my overall goal, which is to essentially just create resources that help AFOLs be better builders, make amazing stuff. So
I think that's such a great goal, and that's something I know Grinch and I are trying to cultivate too, and to some extent on our link tree that we have set up, which is not really to do anything other than just highlight resources for people and builders we like, and just kind of creating that community. And the Lego community in general is so good about that. So very on brand for an AFOL to kind of want to cultivate that kind of community themselves. So
yeah, and I've had the opportunity to go to not a ton but some Lego conventions, and that's also a fantastic way to connect with other builders, inspire them, be inspired by them, etc. I go to the one in Seattle every year, which is BrickCon, but I try to make it up to Vancouver or down to Portland when I can.
Was it Bricks Cascade, right?
Yeah, Bricks Cascade is in Portland, and Brick Can is in Vancouver.
Oh,
and I've been to Brick World once, which was really fun.
Yeah.
I plan to at some point go to the big convention in Virginia because it's near where family lives, but it's usually in the summer, which is we have other things going on. So, yeah.
Well, as you can tell by my Washington D.C. poster, West are from Virginia, so we've been to that was our show growing up was Brick Fair,
Nice.
Virginia.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Brick Fair. Yeah.
But
Cool.
I think, Tom, that's what's so unique and interesting about your AFOL story is, you know, like West and I are brothers, but we have found your impact in very different ways. West was gifted your book, which I just ordered today. I was like, I got to go get this book. And I found you through your part labels, right? But it really all came through. And I think it's such a good analogy for like being an AFOL and a Lego builder and this community of builders that Lego's created of, you know, you kind of go a little bit on this journey, but then you kind of, everybody gets to like a similar need of like, well, now I've got 1 million parts and I need to store the 1 million parts because I'm no longer 5 years old and have a swimming pool full of Lego that my brother and I used to build out of. I want to go efficiently find my parts as I build because I've only got 2 hours to do this and I don't want to spend 2.5 hours finding pieces. And so, you know, it's just it's a cool impact that you've had, you know, on the AFOL community and a really good analogy for what it means to be an AFOL, right? It's giving back to the community, you know, being accessible within the community and just ultimately creating, right? So
Yeah. And I wish I had more time to actually just create mocks, but you know, in a funny way, and I really don't mean this in anything but the most sincere way. Like, I do feel pride when people like who use my resources are building amazing things. I'm not saying I built that, like, but I feel like I played some small part in their journey and unblocking their creativity. Like, that feels really good.
When I want to speak to that because that was something that stood out when you were describing your, you know, journey as an AFOL kind of back into Lego. And one of the things that I think is really great about Lego is how it kind of challenges people to build in a creative way or it can, right? And that's kind of like once you go off the path of like the directions and the kits and the sets and just sort of following, which can have its own impact, right? I mean, that can be very, you know, methodical, and that can be, you know, some days kind of meditative in its own process. We kind of talked about that on one of our episodes, but, you know, there's a whole other journey where you get to explore building kind of without limits. And I think as adults especially, we like to put limits on things, right? We're comfortable with limits. We like the kits because I have an instruction and it tells me what I'm going to build, and that's the finished, polished model that Lego has approved. And so, you know, there's no variation on that, right? But when you're kind of free building and creating for yourself, I find that I'm usually my biggest critic, but it takes a little bit of courage to explore that building journey and being comfortable, being sort of okay with things being incomplete, or, you know, just that journey, I think is a challenge for some people, but it's also part of that process as an AFOL to some extent. It's just really cool that you tried that 30-day challenge to kind of unlock that creativity. And that's sort of the genesis of your story as an AFOL, which I think is really unique. And going full circle, right? Engaging in this system and continuing to help others who are creative unlock their own creativity, I think is really powerful.
And there's something you said that I really like and want to lean into, which is there's this interesting tension between constraints and the freedom to do anything you want. And on the one hand, Lego is this rich palette of parts you could build almost anything with. But on the other hand, there's some quirks about the Lego system, that 5-to-6 ratio, the differences between a regular snot brick and a headlight brick with that 1/2 of a plate thickness difference. The different kinds of brackets, the challenges in building sideways. I actually think that even though these quirks make Lego much harder to build with than if they were literal cubes, it actually is probably one of the things that makes it such a rich problem-solving medium for builders, because you're actually trying to work within the constraints. If we all just 3D printed a part whenever we wanted something with a different shape, it would somehow lose some of the meaning, because you look at a mock and you're like, how did they do that? Because you know that they're limited by this set of rules that we share, which is to build with the parts we got. So it's all about going past constraints, but also working within them. It's really an interesting medium.
A great metaphor for life.
Yeah.
So, Tom, you are the brick architect. I've got to ask you, what's your favorite Lego theme?
It is no surprise that my favorite theme, the theme that I'm most excited to build, is sets in the architecture series. I do find that the sweet spot for me were the sets that were in the a little under 1,000 piece range, and I feel like as beautiful as the Notre Dame set is, and I gave it high marks because I think they really crushed it with that model, I do prefer the ones that are able to capture the essence of a building using the smallest number of pieces possible. Yeah. And granted, I think they may have actually used as few pieces as possible for Notre Dame. It's just a very large and intricate building. But I do really like those smaller ones that really capture the soul of a building in a small number of parts. But if you're going to ask me what my favorite set is, I actually have a different answer. And I thought about this a little bit because, what does it mean to have a favorite set? Is it like the favorite one to have sitting on the shelf, or is it the one where the actual building experience was the most satisfying? And for me, one of the first really big sets I ever built was I found a used copy of the first version of the Death Star where the minifigs go inside.
Yep.
And I found one that I was willing to pay the price. It was cheap enough and I was willing to buy it. But it was used, so it did not have numbered bags. So it was an extra building challenge to build, which I did sort the pieces because that makes that a little less miserable. But it's based on my favorite movie in the Star Wars universe. I loved how they captured so much of the story of the film in the little vignettes, and I think it's just a great example of brick-based storytelling, which is at the heart of any set that has minifigures, especially.
I was not expecting the Death Star. I'm not gonna lie. I was not.
No.
Oh, that's awesome. Great set. Love the vignettes. I did the same thing with Cloud City when they did the kind of re-release. I was like, this isn't special right now, but if I don't get this, I'm gonna be really, really regretting it. And it's a great set. So totally understand that. Wes, did you have any more questions for Tom before we move over to sorting and storing?
Tons of questions, so I will leave it. I have just a couple that I'll leave us with this section, which is the first one is, Tom, your book now is approaching, or it's at its 10-year anniversary, and so if you had a chance to add anything to it, or create a second edition, maybe it's in the works. Don't want to spoil anything. If it is, we'll let what would be maybe an area of expansion, or another area of focus in that kind of direction?
So I actually already kind of shared this answer in a talk I did recently, and I'm not writing another book. No spoilers there. But I did a presentation at a museum locally. That was essentially a distilled version of my book, where I talked about architecture styles and building them with Lego. But what I added to that presentation was I looked a little bit past the newest style of architecture that's featured in the book, which I call high-tech architecture, even though even 10 years ago, and even still now, it's not entirely clear what that style will end up getting called in the lens of history, because architectural styles kind of need time for them to settle and earn a name. But I actually tried to talk a little bit about what's coming even past the stuff that's in my book. And the biggest theme in architecture right now is sustainability, for some pretty obvious reasons. And I talked about and showed examples in that presentation, and I'm happy to share a link with y'all to share with your readers or viewers. But the two sort of themes that are really interesting to me are using new sustainable materials. Like in Scandinavia, they're doing a lot of work with actually wood, which you don't necessarily think of as being a sustainable resource, but as long as you plant the trees again, it's more sustainable than some other options. So they're figuring out how to build like actual skyscrapers using predominantly wood. It's called mass timber is the term of art. And that's pretty interesting. And then the second theme that I think is actually even more fun from an architectural perspective and from a Lego perspective is this trend towards what's called adaptive reuse. That's taking the shell of an old building and building something net new inside of it. One of the best examples that I would like to cite is Battersea Power Station in the UK, which is now, I believe, one of the Apple headquarters and a giant mall. They didn't need the power plant anymore, but the power plant was made out of just so much concrete, and that's essentially a sunk environmental impact, a sunk cost. And instead of tearing it down and having to deal with all this garbage concrete, they built a net new structure inside of it. And it's actually quite striking how they were able to find a totally new purpose for it. So I think that's really interesting. I love it when people can learn about new things that are happening in the world of architecture and design. And I talked about it a little bit in that presentation. So not a full-fledged new book or new chapter, but like it's
in your neck of the woods, pun intended too. In Portland, they do a lot with mass timber. I know they have a few buildings that are kind of made up of mass timber, not anything on the scale that they're talking about now. 20 stories or whatever. The kind of the larger buildings that they're looking at. But Portland's airport was just redone and used a lot of reclaimed and reused timber, and has, I believe, one of the largest timber-based atriums in the United States. They have a really cool, just I know they had to build it on site and then move it over the facility when completed. And so there's some really cool uses of timber these days as a sort of back to basics approach to construction and architecture and design that I think is not only really interesting in terms of its effect on sustainability, but also as Lego, as a hobby and a medium, actually works really well with Lego itself, right? Because it's generally fairly straight lines and straight edges, and so you can kind of see some very similar building styles that you could emulate in Lego very easily with those type of buildings.
Yeah, I actually haven't been to that remodeled Portland airport because it's an airport that's too close to my home. I almost would never fly into it. But there's also some projects here. I got to take a architecture tour of an office building that was opening a couple years ago here in Seattle before it opened, so we could kind of see inside the walls and how they were building it, and it's really cool to see the cutting edge. So yeah.
Well, that's really exciting.
Well,
so
Wes,
Grinch,
was...
I think we could keep talking about architecture for a while, so we'll leave that.
I was gonna say that was one question, and we still have a ton minus one to go. So
you can ask one more if it's at the top if you're ready.
No, let's move on to storage, Grinch, and take it away.
Well, Tom, I think we could probably sit here and talk, for another 2 hours. But if you don't mind reminding people where they can find you.
Yep.
And then we can talk about sorting and storing.
Awesome. So, again, I'm Tom Alphin. My book is The Lego Architect. But because you cannot have a website with the word Lego in it unless you are, in fact, the Lego group, my website is brickarchitect.com with no space. It's just brickarchitect.com. And, you'll find all the resources we've talked about so far, info about my book, my sorting and storage guide, my labels, my Lego parts guide, and a bunch of articles and reviews. They're all there. So please look it up. Come find me.
So we talked a little bit about the storage guide that you put together. I wanted to kind of, you shared your experience, right? So, I wanted to kind of take a step back and make sure we just established a couple of key definitions for the listeners as we're kind of talking about storage. What do you think some of those most important, there's obviously Lego pieces, but like, how do we define, that initial like separation, right?
Yeah, so the two most obvious ways to sort Lego pieces that kind of come up right away for people are you can sort them by the color, or you can sort them by what I'll just call shape. But let's be a little bit more precise what we mean by shape. You could think of shape as sort of broad categories, like bricks are, this tall, plates are thinner. You could sort it into these categories of shapes. But the sort of the ultimate description of shape is a part. And each different part essentially comes out of a different metal mold at the factory. And whether it's green or red or blue, it's still the same part. Now, if you're talking about the combination of a unique part in a very specific color, that's that term is used typically as element. People with extremely large collections will end up sorting not just by part, for example, but actually sorting by element. So they would have a drawer not just of 1x1 plates, but a drawer of 1x1 yellow plates.
Right.
And I could say from my own experience that I am at the point in my own collection where the vast majority of my parts are sorted by part. So I have drawers over here with many different colors in each drawer, but it's just one part or one shape in each drawer. But these drawers on the other side I have a drawer for each common color, and there's a compartment for 1x1 plates because they're so common, and then 1x2 plates in a specific color. So that very small part of my collection is actually sorted by element. But to really bring it full circle for people, it really only does make sense for most people to sort by element. If they have extremely large collections, or if they're only sorting a small part of a larger collection by element. And then, there is the other option is sorting by color, and there are a few people that do that. It's usually visual artists that are doing more mosaic style work where they're more interested in the color than the shape. And they actually kind of like that variegation of different parts to get visual texture when they're really looking for the color to make their art. But that really is the exception, not the rule. Granted, a lot of families think that's the right way to sort, so they will encourage their kids to sort that way. I did not do that to my son. He sorts by part family, and he's got 20 categories that he sorts his collection into.
Well, I was laughing when you were describing that, Tom, because that's actually kind of Grinch's and my history with sorting Lego was sort of arriving at color first, and then as adults realizing sort of the error in our way for the purpose of how we were sorting. So
yeah, and I think that's a very common sorting journey for people, and I'm glad you caught it early enough so that you didn't have to resort too big of a collection, hopefully.
Yeah, you're never quite building and you're like, I need red. You're like, I need a red brick. I need a brick. And then you go, okay, where's my red brick, right? So and one thing that you said too, Tom, that was intriguing and I think really important is you essentially use a hybrid approach, right? Because sometimes when people will read a guide or they'll be like, I'm looking for rules, and then they'll be like, okay, well, I've got 1,000,005 pieces, so I fall under this category, and I have to do it this way. Has that sort of evolved for you over time, and kind of something that you've grown into as you're sorting and storing? A methodology has it adapted over time?
It has actually adapted over time, and I'm actually at an inflection point in my own sorting right now. And maybe in 6 months' time, my own collection will look slightly different. What I've discovered even in the sort of past 10 years since I've, really become a serious AFOL, had a lot of parts and had to figure out how to sort them, is that every year they are introducing at least 50 pretty common parts. And I'm not even talking the like obscure one-off magic wand from one CMF. I'm talking about like actual parts that are used across a fairly large number of sets. And they do retire parts, but they're not retiring 50 to make up for the 50 they're adding. So the collection, the range of parts they're producing is growing over time. And it is, in my opinion, growing to the point where it is not practical, even for people with very large collections, to sort every single piece by part.
Right.
So what I'm getting ready to do, and I have not done, is I'm getting ready to take all of the drawers that only have like 5 or fewer pieces in them and actually dump them into a category drawer instead. So if you were to look at my Lego parts guide, which has my most up-to-date sort of recommended categorization and like it's a hierarchical system of how to organize parts, I have a category for minifigure. And then underneath the minifigure, I have a category for hair, for example. And hair is something that there are very few hair molds that I have more than a couple of. And instead of trying to have like 10 or 20 drawers for the most common hair types, I'm just going to dump them all in a hair drawer and move on with my life. And then a different example would be something like minifigure accessories. And this is a good example of a category where there are some that are actually pretty common and deserve their own drawer. In my case, I probably have enough handcuffs to have a handcuffs drawer. And handcuffs, while seeming single purpose, are sometimes actually used to create patterns and decorations and stuff like that, or or like fences and other creative ways. So many the handcuffs might get their own drawer, but push brooms probably won't because I only have 2 or 3 of them, and it just doesn't really make sense to have a drawer with 3 of something in it. And actually, I think this is a good time to talk about a complicated to describe but extremely important point when it comes to Lego storage. And the point is, do you really want to be storing Lego or do you want to be storing air? And whenever you have a drawer that is mostly empty, you are storing air.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that people, especially with smaller homes or limited space, need to optimize for is storing as little air as possible. And this is becoming a real problem for me because my collection continues to grow and my room is only like 7 feet by 10 feet and I just don't have any more space to put my Legos, so I need to reduce how much air I'm storing. And even though I do not really like storing Lego parts in Ziploc bags because it's hard to find something, you can squeeze all the air out of the bag, you could throw a lot of bags in a bin, and you can really you can have a well-organized, or well-sorted, I should say, collection, storing no air if you keep things in bags and then, shove all the bags into a bin. So it's just one of the many competing constraints that you need to think through when you're figuring out a sorting strategy.
Well, I would say consider this an endorsement of this direction because as I developed, using the assistance of your sorting guide and your stickers and labels, kind of developed a very similar approach, which was just, hey, I have only so much space to store stuff. In this case, I was using Acro Mills bins or containers, and I have only so many drawers. I don't have enough drawers to put the entire animal kingdom, the Lego animal kingdom, into its own drawer. They're just going to go into one, large Acro Mills drawer, and I'm going to call that good, right? Yeah. And so I think that's, I have got a lot of labels of like different animals that are kind of in a, hey, maybe one day I'll have enough spiders to give spiders their own drawer, but right now they get to be, put in with everybody else. So yeah, definitely I think a smart way to go for those who are space limited, or just to your point too, you don't have like, you know, a drawer full of baguettes potentially to store on its own.
Who would have that, West?
I don't know.
I think I actually might have enough baguettes to have a full drawer of them, but everybody's collection is different as well, and that's kind of the core point here. And actually, like, another thing that has caused me to push myself to rethink this strategy of having a drawer for every part is this past year I essentially doubled the number of labels that I have made available to people.
Wow.
I had been making every single label through 2023 was made by hand. I wrote out the word, I exported the image exactly the way I wanted it to be, and I positioned the text and the images exactly where I wanted them to be in the labels. Last year, I automated that entire process, and my Lego parts guide, which is the most recent thing I launched on my website, can generate a label for any part for which I have a custom image. So I went from about 2,000 parts that now have labels to over 4,000 parts that you can have a label for. But that's just too many drawers. Like, nobody needs all 4,000 of those, I don't believe. But the ones that you need are going to be different than the ones that I need. And that's kind of why I'm trying to myself move away from this obsession with having a drawer for every part, and I'm trying to also give other people permission to do the same.
There's a lot to unpack with storage, right? And you know, one thing I heard is like this ongoing battle with air, but like sometimes air, especially with a larger collection where you might have, you know, 10 or 20 acro mills, sometimes you actually even need to leave empty drawers, right? Because you really have to be self-aware in this process, because if your collection's growing, you need room to put pieces without sitting there and literally pulling out every single drawer and being like, okay, time to move everything down one, and just be like, I mean, that's there's a lot that kind of goes into this process, right?
Well, that's actually one of the advantages of having a well-structured hierarchical storage or sorting system. You're welcome to use the one I offer. Some people choose to use Bricklink or other systems, but I don't really find plate comma modified to be a super useful category. But if you have a small enough number of top level categories, so in my case I think there's about 14 top level categories, you can have all the parts in one category, leave a little bit of space if you have some extra drawers, and then go on to the next category. So at the very worst, you're only moving drawers within a couple of rows. Then you know, and then maybe every several years you have to add, you know, 4 more acro mills and, you know, shove things down, or possibly choose to put retired parts in a different storage location. But you're absolutely right. When you add one drawer and you have to move everything, it's not great.
Well, and you know, from my personal experience, you know, with your labels, I noticed right away, because you said, you know, you created some of these images from scratch initially. I think you also renamed some stuff, right? Because, for example, the 1x2 plate with the little rail on it, I believe it's called a modified plate with the rail, but that doesn't fit well when you got an image that's, you know, this big, right? So did you do any renaming or kind of right sizing of the Lego Dewey Decimal System?
Yes. One of the big things that made it take so long to create the original collection of labels and has also taken a long time when essentially automating that process by creating this real-time online parts guide is, I don't find that any other website, whether it's Bricklink, Brickset, the Lego Group themselves, Rebrickable, they all have, from my opinion, terrible part names. And I think it's really important to think about the fact that a name that has to completely convey what a part is in isolation versus a name that is going to sit right next to a picture, that's actually a different job that name is providing. When it's sitting right next to a high quality image of the part, the name is helping clarify what you're seeing in the picture. Whereas if you're trying to describe the part to someone who is blind, you need to be much more verbose about it. And most of the official names on Brickset, Rebrickable, and from the Lego group are trying to be more verbose. And I think that's kind of pointless for a label because you've got the picture right there. So my names are quite a bit shorter than the names you find on other resources for that very specific reason. And it tends to work with people because if it didn't, people wouldn't keep, choosing my labels and, giving me feedback that they appreciate the system. So it seems to be working. I'm always open to ways to make it better, and tweaks to names are always a good idea if people have ideas to make them better. But the gist is, what is the shortest name that can convey the concept?
One, I like too how you're talking about connecting, both the visual medium of the label with the sort of, mental picture that you're drawing by, describing it. And so, you're kind of eliminating the work that someone like the Lego group is doing by doing exactly what you said, right? Like basically asking you to shut your eyes so that I can describe this piece to you and you can picture it in your mind, right? Versus like, no, there's a picture in front of you. So like, I'm just telling you, what it is at the barest, requirements, as both a way to save space, but also so that you're not having to like think twice about it to some extent. While we're on the topic of sort of highlighting a lack of standard of, process here, one of my, huge qualms with this whole system that Lego has created is a lack of a unified color naming convention. And even something on like Bricklink versus like the Lego group, which it's owned by the Lego group, they have a whole separate naming convention for colors, and it drives me insane, especially trying to use Pick-a-Brick or something. And I'm like, was this dark bluish gray or was this dark stone gray? Or I'm not sure anymore. I don't know which is which. So it's just kind of crazy that we don't have this standard to some extent of a standardized naming convention across the board.
Yeah, and when I'm writing articles on my website, like reviews of sets and whatnot, I have some custom scripts for my website to not only write the name of the color, but if it has a different name by the Lego group versus Brickset and other, Brickset is usually the same as the sort of the official the word the fan community uses. I will put the both next to each other with the Brickset name I'm using the wrong term. The Bricklink name in parentheses next to the Lego group's name. But they can be pretty similar, and they can be pretty different. And you've got like brick yellow versus tan. I mean,
right.
Which makes no sense until you visit Billund and you realize that every brick in that town is tan. And then it starts to make sense. And like I actually remember you talking about red versus bright red in that episode a couple weeks ago. And some of those names actually make a little more sense when you look at the colors from a saturation perspective. Everything that has the word bright next to it is a full saturation, essentially a 100% saturation color. So that is why that's there. But most normal people look at that color and they don't think, "Oh, that's bright red." They just think it's red. So that's why the common color name makes more sense.
It's like a very
if I'm hearing
Danish,
you guys,
German approach, right?
Yeah, very literal.
If I'm hearing you correctly, plate modified 1x1 with open O clip horizontal grip is not conducive to putting on a label.
Oh, I can picture it right now.
No, but I mean, I know what part it is. It's the one that's got the two studs on either side like that. But like, no, that's a terrible, terrible name for a human.
What if I put bright red in front of it?
Well, isn't it crazy too?
Not helping.
That like the Lego system that they've created, as like full on nerds, we're sitting here basically acknowledging like we need a universal standard something on the lines of like ASTM for Lego, where like all of us are talking about the same thing. Like a true metric system, if you will, where like when one of us says something, we know exactly what it means. And I just think it's so cool that Lego has become so, just spread out and out there that we're kind of at a point of like recognizing like, no, this is kind of a problem in this community of like sometimes we don't know what we're talking about when we're talking about the same thing.
I don't like cast shade with the Lego group too often, but they bought Bricklink and they had the opportunity to unify the names across their internal tools and the fan community. I'm pretty disappointed they haven't done anything with that yet. Like that seems like a pretty big missed opportunity. And maybe, to be frank, maybe that means that they need to change their internal naming to match reality a little bit better. And sometimes maybe that means changing the Bricklink names because they're not precise or specific enough. But like somebody should really do the hard work of figuring out, okay, what should this be called?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, the Lego group has spelling errors in some of their part names that are officially on their own website. That's ridiculous.
Well, a reminder too that they're not perfect, right? So.
No, it's true.
I will say, Tom, I have a confession. I have your Lego or your labels. I build on Stud.io a lot, or Studio. And so when I originally organized my collection, I did it kind of with your, the Tom Dewey decimal system. And then I was like, but I don't know. Bricklink has it like this. I don't know where this should be over here. So I went back and I redid it. And then I was like, this doesn't make any sense now. So I will say, anybody who's listening and is inspired by these labels, Tom has not only put in the work to make the labels, but also reorganize them in a system that makes way more sense. And pro tip, don't only print the labels on label paper, also print the labels. You have a nice PDF of them, and you can almost use it as like a part manifest and go, okay, from left to right, page 1 is on the left, page 14 is on the right, and just kind of like, 6 is somewhere in the middle, right? So you can also kind of use it as a guide within your own part collection too, right?
Yeah, and as people are deciding for their own sorting journeys, be sure to look at both what I call the classic or legacy label collection, which has my original recommendations for categories, as well as my parts guide, because I've made some adjustments, especially to the top level categories. In the newest version. And one of the main reasons I did that is I wanted the top level categories to be roughly the same size so that you're building this sort of hierarchical understanding of the Lego parts system. The one exception is Technic is a top level category, and it is bigger than any other category because there are so many Technic pieces. I could have chosen to have System as a top-level category and then Technic as a peer, but because of the way Technic has embedded itself into so many system sets, whether it's play sets for kids or Star Wars, even though Technic has evolved to be kind of its own thing over the years, that's what I ended up doing from a trade-offs perspective. But yeah, you're not wrong to sort by using the Bricklink system if that's what works best for you.
Right.
And honestly, I would never critique anyone's system so long as it's meeting their needs.
Well, I went right back to the way you did it, because all of a sudden I was, as I was putting it together, I was like remembering, I was like, masonry brick, that should be over by the palisade brick. And I was like, but they're not.
Yeah. So. And that's one of the other things is all the labels have the part number on it. So if you see the part on your wall with its nice label and you remember it's 3004, you can also type 3004 into Studio and it'll give you that part. And you don't need to remember the number 3004 very long because you saw it on the wall. You turn around,
Right.
you type it into the computer, and then you can kind of ignore their own hierarchy and sorting of the parts and just type out the numbers, or the descriptions or whatever gets you the part easiest.
So we've talked about the bricks, we've talked about the labels, the storage guide. What about what to store the dang things in, right? Like you got to store them in something, right? So have you found that there's a best? I mean, I see the Acro Mills. I have Acro Mills. West has Acro Mills. Is that your preferred, or is that changed, or does it also still depend on kind of some of those factors that you were talking about earlier?
We touched on it earlier, but I don't think we really gave quite enough attention to the fact that something like an Acro Mills system, or those tackle box style compartments with the little cups inside, those really make a lot of sense for very large collections, and they don't make as much sense for small collections. And quite frankly, this sort of system like we have is kind of intimidating to people new to the hobby. It's also wildly inappropriate for most children. And what you need to think about is how much sorting is enough sorting. And for, I would just say, like, it's not perfect to lump it together, but for kids with large collections or adults with relatively small collections, sorting into broad categories is plenty. So like the 20 or so categories my son has, which is like, he has one big bin for bricks. He has actually 3 bins for plates, like 1x plates, 2x plates, 4x plates, and bigger plates. Just because there's so many plates, like we were talking about in current sets, like that, he just needed more bins to fit them all. And then like a bin for minifigures and accessories, a bin for plants, a bin for, in his case, we had to split it out. So we have a bin for Technic, like basic Technic beams and stuff, and then all the other Technic, and then a third one for the pins and axles. So like you're kind of right sizing the number of categories you have for the size of your collection. And that's actually a lot of sorting for a 6-year-old. I'm not saying that's really appropriate for most 6-year-olds, but he's the son of an AFOL and has a lot of Lego. But starting with those category based sorting, and kind of holding on to that system as long as you can kind of get away with it, it would be my revised recommendation for people. But when that starts feeling burdensome, like you really just can't find what you're looking for, or you're not quite sure what you have, that's when you need to start going to, I guess you'd call it a hybrid system, where the most common parts that you have move into being sorted by part, not by element, not by color and shape, but by part. So you might actually pick up a couple Acro Mills or a couple tackle boxes, and you would sort your basic bricks and plates into those, and then everything else might stay in broad categories. And then just make sure whatever system you choose is a system you're pretty sure you can grow with, and also a system that's not too obscure and you won't be able to buy more of it in 5 years when you need more of it. And that's probably the biggest advantage of Acro Mills, is even though they've increased in price quite a bit recently, they have made them for a long time. They will probably continue to make them for a long time, although I have no special information on that. So don't be mad at me if you invest and then they stop making them. But like systems that have been in production for a long time are more likely to be ones you can continue to buy into the future. And having like too many different systems makes your system less flexible. Like it's harder to organize the actual storage bins themselves if they're different shapes and sizes. So it's a journey, and just try to embrace it.
I think Acro Mills needs to lean into this AFOLs connection here, and maybe make some special branded cases just for the AFOL community. So, but I wanted to share. I think while we intentionally are not here to throw any shade on how anybody sorts or stores their Legos. I think both Grinch and I can confidently say that a kiddie pool is not a good sorting solution for all of your Lego collections. And through trial and error, while yes, aesthetically sorting by color looks really nice, it is very difficult to pick out different pieces when you're sorting through like a whole bin of just black pieces or just blue or something. So some definitely some interesting. I love the idea of like find what you need first and then tailor your sorting to that need. And that was I think both Grinch and I were focused on aesthetics when we originally sorted our collection, and now that we're kind of both adults and have our adult collection, we've sorted based off of function rather than form. So kind of a nice way to tie that back into architecture a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it ultimately has to work for you, right? There's no one size fits all. There's no perfect solution for anybody, right? I was kind of chuckling when you were talking about, the different factors that go into determining what you need, because I was like, also attention span, because you get to some point where you're like, I've been organizing this for a week and you've just got this, I quickly found out I had like 6 acro mills, and I was like, okay, I've got an eighth of my collection in here. And then I got to a point where I was like, and now I just have this bucket of Technic and I haven't done anything with it. And I was like, well, can I just separate it by Technic bricks, Technic link arms, Technic axles, and be done with it? Because that could be done in 30 minutes if I do that. Yeah. Or I could sit here and buy 20 more acro mills that are $40 a pop and not spend that on Lego, right? So it's certainly, yeah.
And that's actually a perfect example, because like, if you actually build predominantly in certain themes or styles, you really don't need to sort the parts you don't use that often as well. So if you are not a Technic builder in general, I would think a drawer of axles is fine. You can dig through there and find the specific length you need when you need it. But another thing I also think comes up for a lot of people is some people find sorting a mindfulness activity. If you happen to be one of those people, it may make sense to organize your collection a little bit better. If you find sorting extremely frustrating and you do not like doing it, you'd rather be building or you'd rather be doing literally anything else, you're probably going to be a person who's going to be better off sorting into appropriately sized categories, and then when you need the part, digging through that small bin to find the one thing you need. Because if the sorting is not fun, it's interfering with your hobby. And if the sorting is relaxing, then okay, cool. Or like find a group, like I participate in a Friday Zoom call where people are talking about Lego and often sorting their Lego collection. That's a way to, get it done. Or invite friends over and give them pizza and have them help you sort. I know that seems crazy, but I've heard many people do that. And it actually ends up being fun for everyone a lot of times, because you can talk about parts as you see them, as you're sorting. You can talk about building techniques. You can eat the pizza. I mean, I haven't actually done that, but like it's tempting.
Why are my pieces so greasy?
I think you build like a separate area for the pizza.
Wasn't me. Well, Tom, I think, thank you for sharing, your wisdom on the collection. There's also other things from Lego. There's instructions, there's minifigures. Do you have any tips in those two categories?
I'm not a big minifig collector, so I don't have a ton of hands-on experience for sorting them. The one thing I do that is if I have minifigs that I'm not able to display right now, I try to slip a little piece of paper into a Ziploc bag with the minifig to say what the Bricklink part number for that minifig is now, while I actually can remember what set it came from. Because if you don't do it now, you're going to be like, okay, this is a Ahsoka, but I don't know which one. And then you're like looking at subtle differences in face print or torso print to figure out which one it is. And I have like little pieces of paper that I can just slip into a small bag
Nice.
where I can write the part number, the quantity, the rough value, whatever I feel like writing on it. And then I can just like sort of slip that into they make really small Ziploc bags you can buy for, minifigs or individual parts. And that works well for me for the minifigs I can't display. I'd love to have a nice case to display my favorite minifigs. I don't happen to have one right now. I'm always envious of people who have like a really cool display setup, but I just don't really have the space. So
It takes a lot of space.
yeah,
And time,
and
too.
a lot of money if you're, because like a lot of those minifigs become quite expensive after the sets they came in are no longer available. So I would not want to start trying to get a complete Star Wars collection now,
No.
for example.
I actually read on Reddit the other day on Lego Market, somebody was inquiring about buying it, and somebody recently sold an entire collection of every single Lego Star Wars minifigure for $38,000
Wow.
That sounds about right.
for one of every single one.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So if anybody's wondering out the top of their head, that was 2023 price. It was kind of an old post, so it's 2025 now. I can only imagine. Add 11%
Yeah.
compounded per year and and cry.
Yeah. You did also ask about instruction manuals. My own system is I chuck them in a cardboard box.
Totally.
I actually don't even keep that cardboard box in my house. I have a small storage unit for Lego and some stuff that for my business, and like I just throw them in the box there because I rarely find myself going back to them. But I do keep them because I do sometimes refer to them, especially the Lego architecture ones, because that's probably I would say at this point, Lego architecture and the modulars are probably the two sets that I've been reviewing for a long enough period of time that I feel like those are particularly good articles that I've earned trust of my readers. I do a good job on those, so being able to go back to those is sometimes helpful. But for the majority of them, I don't. If I did, I would probably get a used file cabinet with the drawers, and I would probably sort them into the rough categories by theme, and just slot them in there. I just have not felt the need to spend the time to do that because they fit just fine in the cardboard box.
Yeah.
What I think a lot of people don't understand too is how heavy those boxes get when they're full of instructions.
Yeah.
That adds up fast.
Yeah, you have to get the like bankers style boxes that can hold up to a lot of paperweight. Yeah.
Well, we talked about sorting. We talked about some key definitions, various styles, and I think, Tom, if you could kind of summarize your final thoughts here on storing. I mean, we barely scratched the surface. I gotta encourage the listeners. Go to brickarchitect.com. Check out Tom's storage guide. He's done all the work for you. It's very comprehensive. So
yeah, I think my closing thoughts for people when they're either starting in their own storage journey or getting ready to revise or update their storage approach is to try to be flexible and to try to be patient with yourself. To also to try to take time to reflect on what you actually need. An example of this is if you really are starting from nothing, as tempting as it is to just go out and buy some storage, whether it's Acro Mills or other cabinets, and start sorting into that. If you have a large room, even if it's in an awkward place like a basement or a garage, just get a lot of Ziploc bags or old yogurt cups or whatever, and just start sorting, because you don't really know what you have until you've got it sorted at least into some basic categories. And from there, how many bins you need, what style of bins you might want, can become a little bit more obvious. And, take your time in that regard. Another thing to just remember is, like I said a few minutes ago, sort until you've reached the point of diminishing returns. Unless you find sorting super relaxing, sort until you can find things. And once you've reached the point that it's easy to find stuff, you don't need to sort it anymore. And I guess lastly, just think of different ways to sort of optimize everything, your whole system over time. A little trick that I use that other people I've heard use as well is if your primary storage system, let's say it is an Acromills drawer, if you end up with too much of that part to fit in that one drawer, you might be tempted to get a larger drawer or use 2 drawers for that part. Another perfectly valid approach is to really reflect on that learning that Ziploc bags are awesome from a storage density perspective because you're never really storing air. And I made little cards, and I'll just slip it into the back of the drawer, and it just says, there's more of this. And it's a reminder that I have more of that part somewhere else. If those extra parts are sorted by color, I might write like about 100 in green, 200 in brown. And then I just know when I open that little drawer that I can get to quickly that I've got plenty there to just keep building. Especially like I often call it rainbow building, where you try to build with the colors that you want to build it in, but you build with whatever colors you've got to just get the creativity, keep the creativity going without interrupting your flow. But knowing that there's 200 more of them in a drawer or in a different bin, it might be worth going and grabbing them right now. I call it a redirect. It's like redirecting, it says there's more of this somewhere else. And then find your own optimizations. Figure out what makes sense for you. And honestly, like one of the other things to think about is don't buy Lego is like kind of a different way of thinking about your collection. And what I mean by that is, with the exception of rare parts or rare minifigures, you always can order more of something on Bricklink or other websites. So this whole idea of I'm going to just buy a whole bunch of something in case I might need it later, it just feels a little bit wasteful unless you really are committed to a very specific project that's going to use those very specific parts. Because if you end up using them, great. Maybe you got them for a good deal and you actually saved some real money. But if you ended up never using them, those parts they're sad. I always think of parts as sad if they never get built with. So, you want to avoid sad Lego by trying not to hoard parts you're never going to use. Because then you have to store them.
The next time you're at the Pick-a-Brick wall and you see baguettes, you do not need to buy half of a cup of baguettes.
I think a good lesson learned.
And honestly, don't be ashamed to sell things you don't need on Bricklink. It's not hard to make a Bricklink store, count out 100 of them, extra baguettes, and just be like, if I buy baguettes, price them cheaply so someone buys them, and
or 400 baguettes,
whatever the amount is, like.
But I really like it too,
but like
because we just had a Bricks and Minifigs open up near me, and take them to somewhere where they'll use them, right? Like, and you might not be recouping your investment in baguettes, but somebody else could use 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. Or bring them to, if you're a member of a lug, you could bring extra parts that you don't need. Encourage friends to bring them too and swap a little bit, There's lots of ways to, if you really do have too much of something, to get it into the hands of someone else and free up that space to store something you're more excited about.
Well, I think that wraps up our main topic today. Tom, can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your life, out of your busy schedule, away from your family to join us on AFOLs Welcome. So I think with that, do you want to remind everybody where they can find you? And then we'll move over to Brick Mail.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for everyone who's still listening after this lengthy conversation. I'm Tom Alphin. You can find me at brickarchitect.com. Please check out my Lego parts guide, my Lego storage guide, and just poke around and see if anything else catches your attention. Shoot me an email or if you see something you like. So thank you so much.
Brick Mail. All right, so that was today's topic. Just wanted to give Tom another huge thank you for coming onto the show and talking through all of his great experiences, his story, brick architect. I mean, he's done so much, really a staple of the Lego community and one of the OGs too, right? So thank you again, Tom, for joining. West, why don't you take away with our first bit of brick mail here?
Yeah, so our first brick mail comes from John FC66, who wrote on Spotify and said, "Great episode as always, especially on a topic I don't know much about. Just found your Instagram and I love the posts." So thanks, John. And I want to shout out, kind of in this vein, Taco Builds on Instagram, one of our longtime listeners, has had a very strong meme game, and is always here to just bring some little brother energy. And he posted a particularly funny post, which was very on topic. Not only because I loved, or I'm a big fan of Friends, and my wife is a big fan of Friends, but really fun to see the Imperial Fortress get a shout out in that capacity, and just given a good old nature ribbon for my inability apparently to correctly say the name of that set on multiple episodes.
What is the name of that set that you got a couple of weeks ago, West?
Pirate Island Hangout,
Yeah.
the Pirate Fortress, the Imperial Army Port City Pirates.
One day you're just gonna call it El Dorado Bay, and I'm just gonna be like, yeah, we were so close.
Oh, and I did say even on this one, Imperial Fortress, it's the El Dorado Fortress. Yeah, so I just need to build it. I think that's what I need to do.
Yeah,
I need
dude.
to open it up and build it. So
There you go. And I did want to say
yeah.
thank you, John, especially because it really short comment, but it really means a lot that you were able to enjoy an episode about a topic you really didn't know about, right? I think
Yes.
that really is reassuring to West and I that like we're on somewhat of the right path here, and able to kind of keep you entertained, about something in the Lego world, introduce something new to you, a little bit of history, which is definitely the goal there. So, thank you, John.
And
Wes, do you
John,
want to
if
take
there's
this?
yes, I was just saying, and John, if there's
Okay.
something you want to meme to, particularly my pronunciation of something, please go for it. We appreciate the posts on Instagram, and we will post them when people share them with us. So
Yes, we will.
don't hesitate.
All right, West. How about you take the final piece of brick mail here?
Yeah, so our final brick mail came from Corey Less, who writes in, "Gentlemen, first and foremost, Grinch, congratulations on the new builder in the family. It's one of the
Thank you,
great
sir.
joys in life. As a father that just sent his son off to college, Lego is still something we can discuss and bond over, even though he's 3 hours away. My Lego collecting has started to evolve, and I attribute some of that to your show. The different IPs like Star Wars and Batman is what brought me out of my dark age. Listening to your show has opened up other themes to me I would have never considered before. I've also dabbled into Lego investing as a means to subsidize my hobby. Not a bad idea. Both of these things have allowed me to learn and research sets I would have previously ignored. For example, I'm building set number 80112, the Auspicious Dragon. I bought this set because I was amazed at the focal point of the set, which is obviously the dragon. The base of the set was barely noticeable to me. I was 5 bags into the set, there are 10 total, when I realized I hadn't even started on the dragon except for the feet. The detail and the construction of the base has blown me away. It has really given me a new appreciation to the thought that is put into this design, not just the aesthetics, but the structure and sturdiness of the build as well. This experience has stoked my curiosity, and it will make me start looking at other sets and themes with a whole new perspective. I will definitely be experimenting with new themes because of this amazing set. P.S. Have you thought out how to childproof your display cabinets? Corey.
I have First of all, Auspicious Dragon is a wonderful set. Truly wonderful set. And I believe there was a mock builder that made like a super large version of it with way more detail for like the Lunar New Year when that set kind of came out. They probably were working on it beforehand. Awesome mock if you've seen it and know what I'm talking about. I have not thought about how to childproof the collection other than like shutting the door. Maybe is that mean? I don't know. That's like I can only think like a week ahead of time right now, so that's like 1 year from now Grinch's problem.
You're in the thick
And
of it.
we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
So Grinch's collection is actually downstairs in his house currently. So your childproofing is just shutting the door to your downstairs basement, which is a good childproofing technique. Keep that door shut.
Yes.
Highly recommend.
Yes. And I did want to say, going back to Auspicious Dragon, because I love the set, he's holding like this orb or pearl in it, and I had no idea what that was. And like that was such a good set because it was one that kind of really captured the culture well. So, it was a set that gave more than just the building experience. It also gave a little bit of like cultural history into the Lunar New Year. And apparently that orb is supposed to like represent spiritual energy and wisdom and power, is what I could kind of find, like the power that the dragon carries with it. And it's, the dragon often kind of gives the pearl to help people. I had to source that from a couple different sources. So if I'm like totally off base on there, somebody, drop some knowledge in the comments, but, just kind of a cool set overall. And Corey, thank you for the well wishes. Everything's well in the Grinch household. And of course, thank you for writing in. We're glad you're listening to the pod, and really the ultimate compliment, right? Because like, part of the reason, you said Star Wars, so you've kind of triggered me. That's part of the reason I don't collect Star Wars is because there's so much else in the world of Lego, and I'm a little bit of a completionist, and I knew it can be Star Wars or nothing. And when I looked at it, I was like, but there's all this other stuff, and this other stuff kind of does everything that does, but a little bit differently. And I just wanted the diversity in the collection. So, glad we've helped you along on your AFOL journey. That really means a lot. And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to the show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at afolswelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. Do you think like Mozart went up to Beethoven and was just like, yo, that slaps? What was that?
Probably.